There's always some people popping up that I add into the chat. So we're here really to talk about this thing called Bowtie Analysis. I'm going to assume you've come across it in one way, shape, or form, and you're curious about how we can evolve it, how we can improve it. And so I'll jump into that. So I've said this at the start of all my webinars. If you can, turn off any notifications, turn your phone over. We're going to go hard for about 40 minutes, and then we'll move into a bit of question and answer. So if you can just create the space for that, then that'll give you your best chance to soak everything up. And just so we're on the same page when talking about a bow tie analysis, this is a very, very simple visual representation. We use it in our training course, so try not to pull it apart, but we know that there's a parent hazard. In the middle, the center of the knot, we have our unwanted event, in this case, a loss of control of a vehicle. Over on the left-hand side, we have the different causes that could lead to a loss of control of vehicle. So speeding, driver distraction, water on road. Over on the right-hand side, we've got the various consequences that could result from a loss of control of vehicle, be it a injury, damage to equipment damage, pedestrian strike, traffic delay. And then we can see that we have these pathways. I use the term pathways, where we have our controls. So we've got some preventative controls, which are designed to prevent a driver unfit to drive, leading to a loss of control of a vehicle. And then we have some mitigating controls, which are designed to mitigate the magnitude of the consequence, either in and of itself or how much energy there is once we've lost control. So hopefully that's a refresher, but that's the terminologies and that's what we're thinking about today, or I'm thinking about when we're going to talk about bow tie analysis. Obviously, there's other things we do inside a bow tie, which we probably won't cover today. We just don't have the time. All right, so where are we with bow ties? Is there a problem? If there is a problem, what does that problem look like? And how do we know there's a problem? So my perspective in the work that we do across lots and lots of clients, yes, we see some problems with bow ties, deficient bow ties, issues with controls, and how do we know what's the evidence of that? Well, just about every bow tie we come across, we pull apart and help the client move forwards. But also we're having people dying or similar from these unwanted events that in theory have got a bow tie and controls in and around. So clearly we've still got a way to go in getting this right. And what my commitment is here is I'm going to cover off three areas or three aspects in relation to bow tie analysis that if you're able to put in place will significantly enhance the effectiveness of your bow ties. And they're not hard things at all. About me in less than 10 seconds for those that I haven't met in person or come across. So Christian Young, been in mining safety almost 25 years now. For the last 5 years had Impress Solutions, and we do a lot of work in critical risk. And here's just some of the clients that we've supported over the last 5 years. So critical risk is everything from broad brushes to bow ties, critical controls, performance standards, everything in that bucket. So yeah, we've done a bit of work, and the stuff that we'll go through today is certainly some of our learnings from the collective. So we've got the practical aspect and then the theory aspect. So I've mentioned this one as well. So I'm working on the term when I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next, or just reflecting on things. And my daughter watches the playback video, and I have to pay her 5 push-ups every time for that. So I'm working on that. I'm going to shorten it. Well, that's normally, so critical control management or critical risk management, CRM, CCM. Bow ties really don't have a shortened term. Going to move fast, and there's a bit of interaction as well. So really keen to get from you some of your questions or some of your insights that helps us ensure that we're on the right page. So a bit about the structure. So I'm going to cover off these fundamentals, go through them, try and do that within 45 minutes, then have time for some Q&A at the end. So we can hone in on if there's any particular questions that you might have. And obviously a 45-minute slot or an hour slot isn't going to cover off everything that I'd love to cover off. So at the end, I'll talk about what you can do to get some more information, some more help if you need in this space. And I'll also talk around If you stick around to the end, I'll talk about how you can get a copy of this recording and slide pack, and I think there might be a free bonus as well. So first bit of interaction. So question to everyone. We'll give everyone probably about 30 seconds to type something in. What are you seeing as the biggest pain points or the issues or the hardest part about getting bow tie analysis right? Now, this might be in your experience from industry. It could be in your current workplace. Could be just an observation you're seeing. What are you seeing as some issues, some sticking points or some barriers around bow tie analysis, and why aren't we getting it right? So I'll keep an eye on the chat. I'll give everyone 30 seconds, just throw something in. Christian, pretending that we know all the inputs. Oh, yes. That's a good one. Rob, critical controls. Craig, agreeing to what a critical control is versus support. I love that, mate. You should have jumped on our previous webinar. You might have been on that. Matt G, getting the key people involved in work to participate in the analysis. That's a good one. We don't have the right people in the room, we're going to end up with a pretty rubbish outcome. Ryan, focus. Good to see you, mate. Focusing on what is critical and what is not. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. I'll keep an eye on the chat in case anyone else wants to throw something in. You guys have nailed it. David, what are the critical controls? Yeah, I'm not going to cover off that one. I covered that 2 weeks ago, but I'll see if we get time. I might just loop back to some of that content that we covered off, because that's really key. So let's now jump into the first idea or the first concept. Just making that a little bit bigger on my notes page over here, which is around, where are we heading? What's our destination for the bow tie? And we know if we're not clear, we can end up in a space that is unhelpful. So we want to be clear on the unwanted event. So, crude analogy, but maybe it has happened to someone in their lifetime. So imagine you want to travel from LA to Austria, and the booking people stuffed it up and you ended up going to Australia instead. So it's a simple wording change, just a few letters, but we've ended up in completely the wrong place, maybe like Australia anyway, and you get on with it. So the same thing can happen if we think about bow ties, that if we get the middle of the bow tie wrong, we can end up in a completely different area from where, in theory, we should have gone. And that could be realized as in terms of missing causes, missing consequences, maybe missing controls, can be a flow-on effect from that. And this might sound familiar and so organizations that we're with, here's how this may manifest. So we're seeing the center of the bow tie could be a failure of a control, or it could be a consequence. We see that there's critical controls that aren't even related to the unwanted event, but they're thrown in there. We're seeing that our reviews, so our investigations or our critical controls verifications, are finding gaps in our bow ties. I wonder if any of that might sound familiar to what you guys are seeing. And where you want to be is the opposite end of that. So we've got absolute clarity on what's the unwanted event that's going to be analyzed. And we also have a good relationship between what the broad brush risk assessment says the unwanted event is and what the bow tie analysis says what the unwanted event is as well. So a little bit of theory here. So the description of the unwanted event should describe a point in time at which the system has gone from in control to out of control, or the energy source has gone from in control to out of control. So what does that mean with a little bit more theory? And for those who joined the training course, you would have seen us go through this. So what this visual is representing, it's got our blue zone here, which is our safe to unsafe boundary. But so if we end up unsafe, it's unacceptable, but we can recover. So this is where we might have high potential incidents or things like, or near misses and things like that. Whereas the red line is showing where we're going from the recoverable to unrecoverable. And that's where we end up with incidents, that uncontrolled release of energy, or that uncontrolled process being realized. We can't recover now. So it's a question back to yourselves. If we think about then think about the activity of working at heights, obviously that's not the center of the bow tie. What would be, if we're thinking about, what would be the terminology that we put in the center of the bow tie? And adding to that, think about what would be the point in time at which we've lost control, or that activity's gone from in control to out of control. Anyone want to throw something in the chat? So the activity is working at heights. What would be the center of the knot? Christian, got person falls. Dave, fall from height. Anyone else want to throw something in? Thank you, Christian and Dave. You guys are absolutely correct. So once someone's falling, we've lost control, haven't we? And then we're relying on our mitigating controls. Thanks, Rob. And saying, yeah, Christian dropped objects. So once someone starts falling, then we're relying on our mitigating controls to help reduce the consequence. So if I'm wearing a harness as an example, that'll be a mitigating control, isn't it? If I'm working at height. So I fall, I've lost control, but the harness kicks in, lanyard, all that sort of stuff. And hopefully I don't touch the ground. So what about vehicle interactions? This is one that everyone would have as well. If our activity or our apparent hazard is vehicle interactions, what might be the way we can describe that as a loss? So we've got plant versus person. Probably not. Well, it depends. I'd need more understanding. That maybe isn't the one that we would normally use. HV hits LV. I'm going to loop back to that one, Rob. Thanks for having a crack. Craig, uncontrolled movement. Mark, collision with vehicle or person. Craig, uncontrolled movement. Potentially, Craig, you might be there. It's kind of a bit of a trick one. And yeah, I'll go back to that. So let's now think about, so I think a few people said, I think collision, or let's say strike with that. So one of our rules is the center of the knot is the point in time at which we've lost control. So therefore, it's the point in time before we've had a consequence. So things like collisions or contact or anything like that, they are consequences, but they're not the unwanted event. The unwanted event, if I just go backwards before I go forwards, is having a loss of control. So we're driving for whatever reason, now we've lost control. Okay, once we've lost control, many things might result. What this slide is showing is what can happen is if we choose a consequence as the center of the knot. So here we said, okay, well, for whatever reason, our organization said vehicle collision is our center of the knot. And now we're going to look at causes and consequences of vehicle collision. So let's say if we did that, yeah, we might have some consequences, damage, injury, maybe traffic delay. However, all of these other types of consequences that could be identified if our center of the knot was loss of control of a vehicle, we would pick up. So pedestrian strikes, because that could be something that happens if we lose control of a vehicle. If we have an LV collision, maybe less so. Over open edge, into body of water, vehicle rollover, all of those sorts of things, they can be identified from a loss of control, whereas a collision, unlikely. I haven't worked it, but same on causes, I'm pretty sure too, if you went deeper on the causes, there's probably going to be some deltas in causes identified for light vehicle collision as opposed to causes for loss of control. So hopefully that's making sense. I did move backwards and forwards there, but that's just re-emphasizing the middle needs to be a loss of control. It shouldn't be a consequence or a failure of a controller, which is one other thing we see here. So in the slide pack, which we'll share with you, there's some good examples and poor examples in there, and some rationale as to why. So earlier this year, we did some work for a client who asked us to review their critical risk management processes. Pretty much, we do an effectiveness audit. And so they had 30 bow ties. We said, okay, let's have a look at the bow ties. Let's go through them. Out of the 30, how many do you think we found some issues with the center of their knots in their bow tie suite? Just as a guess. What do you think? So 30 bow ties. How many do you think there were some issues? Christian 12. Anyone else want to have a stab? Rob 100%. Ooh, Matt G 20. Yeah, that's pretty good. The hint here is 50%. So 14 of them, there were some issues with the center of the knot in their wording, and it just broke some of these rules. So think about what we just showed, that if we get the center of the knot wrong, we can see we miss consequences, potentially miss causes. So over half of their things for their big ticket items, there was issues with. And so a bit of a ripple effect. They're like, holy shit, got to do something about that. And then we embarked on a process to go and tidy it up and fix it up and everything like that. But it was very easy. So to round out the action points, you need to have a look at your bow ties. Ensure the center of the knots are a loss of control event. And if you find deficiencies, then obviously there's an opportunity to do something about them. Because we know if we get them wrong, we're dealing with fatality risks here, increased likelihood of something bad happening. So self-assessment rating, so everyone on the call should be able to do this. So we've just gone through some content about getting the center of the knot right. How would you rate your organization, or maybe a previous organization or industry overall, on a rating of 1 to 10? What do people think? Dave's 7. Christian 5. Who else? Ryan's 7. Rob's a 5. Yep. What else we got? Ma, I'm sure you see a few. Alf, what about you, mate? Craig, introducing to your organization now. Okay, that's good. Ma's 4 to 5. What else is on there? That's some good ones. All right. Just keep an eye on the ratings there. All right. So essentially, I round out each section with you got the choice. So we've seen now the impacts if we don't get the center of the knot right. We've covered some rules around what is the criteria to get the center of the knot, and we saw a client there where almost 50% of their bow ties, they hadn't got it right, and there was a big impact that they had to then repair. So what type of difference would it make to your bow ties and your critical risk management framework if you got the center of the knot right? And it wouldn't make a change, and you know that some gaps, then I'd suggest that's an opportunity for improvement. So we know, just rounding this out, that defining an unwanted event as a loss of control is the key strategy to getting our bow ties right. So a second idea here is about using the bow tie at the wrong times. And I had to find a good picture, and that one's not too bad, in terms of using the wrong tool at the right time. So imagine if you were and Matt G, you might be close to this actually, mate. You're a professional road cyclist and also a professional mountain bike cyclist. So you operate in both worlds. And for whatever reason, you rocked up to your next mountain bike race. Maybe you set yourself a challenge and you used your road bike. Yeah, so it's got skinny tires and no suspension. How do you think you would go inside that mountain bike race? And because you're pretty fit, maybe, using your skills and experience, you'd probably go okay. Unlikely you would win because you just weren't using the right piece of equipment as it was intended. So the same thing can happen with bow ties. There's a time and a place for using them. If we use them at the wrong times, you could try and use your skills and experience to make it work, but it's likely that there's going to be some deficient outcomes, potentially in causes, consequences, controls, even critical controls, and the flow-on effects from that. And when we see, Matt G, risk of injury too high, yeah, fair enough. And when we see some of these confusions, this is what we're seeing here is no one actually has clarity on when we use bow ties, or we've seen some, I'll use a crude term, bastardization of a bow tie template because they're trying to make it do some other things like adding likelihood and consequences, or we're using bow ties for multiple step processes or on complex systems. And where we wanted to be is we've got absolute clarity on when we use a bow tie and when we don't use, and if we don't use it, then maybe what's this other tool that is applicable for this other point in time. So some principles or some ideas here. So if we think about the bow tie and how it's structured, it's essentially one unwanted event or one hazard in the middle, isn't it? And then we really go hard and deep on that hazard. So bow ties are designed to analyze one loss of control event at a time. And here's just some examples of the center of the knots or the things where we might be using bow ties. So they are not, moving over in the middle, they're not designed to analyze a scope with multiple hazards. And we've got some examples there. So if, let's say, for example, we want to do a risk assessment on our confined space process. So process being multiple steps with multiple hazards, bow ties aren't suited for that. Similarly, they're not designed to look at complex systems and failure modes. And there's some examples there of what might be a complex system in there. So that's an overview. Let's think now through the lens of a hazard. So let's think about electrical. So I'm sure all of us have worked at businesses, maybe current place, there's electrical energy. I don't know, high voltage lines, whatever it is. There's lots of electrical energy wandering around. So if I wanted to do a risk analysis of my isolation process, so let's say if I have a 10-step process or an 8-step process, the process I use to manage or to work with electrical energy, then that's where I'd use a RAC. So workplace risk assessment and control, where I can map it out step by step by step, go left to right, likelihood, consequence, controls, preventive controls, future controls, blah, 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 blah. That's where a RAC comes in. If I wanted to do, following my critical risk management pathway, do an assessment on the loss of control of electrical energy, which could be named as contact with live electrical conductors, then that's where I do a bow tie to look for causes of contact with live electrical conductors or consequences, and then what are my preventive controls, mitigating controls, critical controls, etc. Also, and it's highly likely that this might be in your business as well, we might have all of our electrical protection infrastructure set up across our site or across in our business, and we might want to understand its failure modes and things like that and effects. And that's where there's tools like HAZOPS or failure modes effect analysis, or I heard from Mika the other day. Tom, you're at Hale Creek. I'm sure the guys there in the plant talk about that, but there's a tool for that as well. So we can see where bow tie lives and where it doesn't live. And so when we come into an organization and look at show us your safety and health management system, sometimes we might see RACs are done for loss of control events, or sometimes they've tried to do bow ties over here or bow ties over here. And again, using their skills and experience, they tried to make it work, but it doesn't give them the outcomes compared to using the right tool for the right job. So honing in again, what do you need to do? If you've got a suite of bow ties, as well as checking the center of the knot, have they been used for the right scenarios versus a different, should a different tool have been used? And if we find some examples of incorrect use, then opportunity for improvement to move forwards. So give yourself a rating, 1 to 10. Now, this is pretty minutiae in terms of this. How would you rate yourself in terms of using your organization using the bow tie at the right times? You may or may not have any insights into this, but if you can, 1 to 10, what are you seeing? See, people have to share. Give everyone about 10 seconds. Throw a little thing in there between 1 to 10. Does anyone have any insights on that? I think everyone's a bit silent. Maybe you mightn't have any insights there. Tom, you're drawing on a slide. Okay, thank you. You can just put it in the chat function, but thanks, Tom. David, just doing our first review, maybe a 5. Yeah, cool. Look, and this is really getting deep and technical in that space. And so I'm really going deep, but you can see the issues there if you don't get it right. What happens? Tom, I think that 8's going to live there now. That's all right. We can live with it. All right, so wrapping this bit out now, we know bow ties have a time and place. Make sure they're in the right time and place, and we know the issues if we don't get it right. maybe Tom, if you can work out how to rub that out, but I'll move forward anyway. So we get the gist, making sure bow ties are for loss of control of events and not multi-hazard things. Thanks, Tom, is the key strategy. All right, now the third aspect is around thinking about the controls that are being liberated by your bow ties or the bow tie process. And are they really doing anything that's helpful? So I'm not a soccer player, but I think 3/4 of the world is. But imagine if you were the coach for a soccer team, and you were pretty broad in the instructions. You said to your team, you looked at your 11 players and said, okay, you three up the front, stay up the front, you attack. You three, you're in the middle, do some stuff in the middle, attack and a bit of defending, and then you four at the back, including goalie, okay, you guys just defend. If that was the instruction that you gave, how do you think your team would perform? Would they know what their role was? Do I go here, go here? What if this happens, then what? All that sort of stuff. And how would you know they were doing the role in your mind you thought they needed to do? Be pretty hard, wouldn't it? So the same principle we can apply to controls in our bow ties. So if our controls, and there's some criteria I'll get to, but if they're not specific, measurable, and audible in what we want them to do, how do we know they're working or not? Or how do other people know what we want them to do? And does some of this sound familiar? You might see this in your organization, your experience, where we've got broad statements for our controls. We're just copying and pasting controls left and right from risk assessment to risk assessment. When I read the control, it's so broad, I have no idea. If I had to audit that, I don't know what to do. Or we couldn't audit the effectiveness of the control because we're still not clear on what it is. And where we want to be, well, I'm assuming anyway, is when our controls will be specific and we want to perform an effectiveness assessment on our key controls, which I won't jump into today. We just don't have the time. So it's almost rhetorical, but interested in your views. Why would it make sense to go to the level of detail and make sure our controls are defined in such a way that they're specific, measurable, and auditable, plus a number of different criteria? So I'll give everyone 30 seconds. Why should we care? Why do that design work on the controls? Christian, so that's suitable and effective. It's a nice insight, mate. Thank you. What else? What do other people think? Why bother? Shouldn't we just leave them as is? Rob, so that you understand that they are effective. Yeah, that's an excellent insight. Thank you, mate. Who else? Anyone else got any thoughts on this one? Ryan, you can determine controls working and if they are independent or dependent. Yeah, I like that. Thanks for using some of that nice vernacular as well. So I think we're honing in and around the same thing about the effectiveness. And ultimately, think about, well, what's the end point if they're not effective? David, sustainability of the control. Yeah, that's a good one as well, mate, which I might talk to a little bit later. Choose your fatality report, choose your coroner's report, certainly in relation to workplace health and safety. Invariably, we see issues with controls. So I've extracted this from the Brady report, which is a report that was done into mining fatalities across a 17-year period. I think it was released a couple of years ago. And I've just highlighted some things. I'm not going to read through this. Again, you can see it in your slides, but, reliance on admin controls or, you can see here, in one case, effective controls were removed and replaced by redundant ones. All of these issues that we're having with controls. So we really want to get them right to then ensure they're effective and can withstand the test of time. So a little bit of some theory. Now, you may have come across these terms before, may have not. Certainly, I talked about this in the other webinar, the idea that a control can be described as either an act, an object, or a technological system, which is a combination. I'll jump into each of those soon. And there's also some extra rules in there as well. The one that I'm hot to trot on, which is around linked to a management system. which I'll talk to. Yeah, we've got a little bit of time. So if you could now just give a quick self-assessment for your organization. How well does your organization's controls in bow ties, or maybe even out of bow ties, how well do they go in meeting all of this criteria? You went to your risk assessment right now and looked at the controls, give yourself a rating out of 10 for a bow tie and looked at the controls. Dave's given a 4. It's an honest 4. Yeah, Craig's a 4. Rob's a 7. Okay. Christian out of bow tie 6. Mars 5 to 6. Yep, Tom's a 6. Thanks, Tom. All right, so kind of middle of the pack. So we're probably all identifying that there's some opportunities for improvement, which is highly likely. And I've been in that scenario myself historically. So what's an act? Is essentially I use the simple thing is if I could watch it through a video camera or through my phone video, that's most likely an act. So someone does something, which yeah, you can see that, and those acts can be defined in a few different areas. Now we do have time to do this. I like asking this question. So what are your thoughts on this question? Thinking about the definition of an act is isolation procedure, an act type control for the hazard of incorrect isolation. So it's a simple yes, no. Just think about the definition of an act. Mar's gone no, Christian's gone yes. Ooh, interesting. What other people think? You follow it, yes. What are some other thoughts? Rob, Ryan, Tom, Alf. Craig's gone a no. Tom's gone a yes. Matt G, what do you think? No. All right, it is a bit of a trick question. And Christian, you're not wrong. There is no right or wrong. I guess it's just evolved. So if we took the pure definition of what's an act, an isolation procedure, so that wording is not an act. I can't watch isolation procedure. What the opportunity is for all of us, myself included, is generally a procedure is a collection of acts. We go and look inside the procedure to find what is the specific act. And in this scenario, it might be test the system is de-energized prior to commencing work. Cool. That's what we put in our bow tie. That's what we have in our risk assessment. So that's the act control as opposed to isolation procedure. So an object, complete opposite, there's no human involved, does its thing, like guardrails or, I don't know, sensors or interlocks and all that sort of stuff as well. So another trick question. Christian, think of the worker following the act, not the paper. Yep, nice. So think about the definition of control. What do people think here? Which of these are object type controls? Yeah, so think about the definition of object. Which of these are object type controls? What do people think? Give everyone sort of 30 seconds to throw something in. Mark's gone all, David's all, Rob's all, Craig's all. Okay, everyone's gone all in. Okay, interesting. Seatbelts. All right, it is another little boom gate. Okay, it is another trick question. So if we think about an object doesn't require a human to do what it needs to do. So if we looked at those, then, theory, if we think about seatbelts, well, seatbelt has the object, the reel and everything like that, but also a human needs to put it on and plug it in. Same with boom gates. We think about where I live in North Queensland, the boom gates only come down a little bit. You could still drive around them. Maybe in the capital city, they come down. You can't move past them anyway. So yeah, the other two require acts to enable their success, which then moves us into this third type of control category, which is a system, which is a combination where we've got, an object and an act together, then give us a system type control. So a seatbelt could be a system, same as the boom gates. Okay, I won't ask that. So specific, measurable, and audible. This is one I think that all of us do well, myself traditionally have done very poorly. If I keep thinking about the way that control is described, could I audit that? In the first part of my career, not the last 5 years, but the first part of my career, I couldn't confidently say yes. So again, thinking about specific, measurable, and auditable. And the last bit, I've got a little 4X there that's standing by itself. And this is one that we're really heavy into, certainly a critical risk management space, is making sure these controls are integrated, embedded in the management systems. So for example, let's go here, so testing for dead, although we use the other terminology, verify, blah, 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 blah. So where is that embedded in our system? Okay, it's in our isolation procedure. That's what we do. We might have it in our permit process. All of our training stuff might also have it embedded. A different one could be, for example, we say, okay, all of our anchor points are inspected and certified every 12 months. Okay, that's great. Now within our management system, where have we embedded that so that we ensure the control does what it needs to do for forever? And we could say, okay, well, in our working heights procedure, we say that's what we do. And then also in our maintenance system, we have a whole 12-monthly cycle that continues forever on ensuring a specialist comes in and inspects our anchor points. And this idea is we can't have orphan controls. So whenever I do any risk assessment, certainly bow ties, when someone says, oh, okay, we do X, Y, Z, let's say it's an act, then our follow-up is, okay, which document is that written in? Or where is that embedded? Because we can't have these things that people say are in place or assume are in place, but might not be. And an example is this anchor point one. I actually was doing some work for an organization, and we were doing a falling from height bow tie, and they talked about, oh, we've got some anchor points which are bolted in some plant somewhere. I said, cool, all right. Is there an inspection and maintenance thing? And they're like, yeah, there is, because we do across whole site. But someone said, oh, I'm not sure. They looked inside the work order and they worked out that those 4 orphan ones, no one had checked and hadn't checked forever. So that was just some simple things we unpacked when we asked those questions. Okay, so we talked about controls. Again, this one isn't around critical controls, but it's just important for us to call out and recognize that, we've only talked about the definition of a control here in the context of bow tie. This is the whole critical risk management framework, which I can't unpack. There's also some other things we normally do inside the bow tie to get to this point of critical control, such as effectiveness assessments. Christian, you might have talked about as well, verifying is it a control versus support activity versus monitoring activity versus none of those. And then applying some questions. I think Ryan, you called it out. Is it independent of other controls in the same pathway? All of those things go together to get us this point of critical controls. So I won't even ask that. I was going to talk about that same client we helped with their 30 bow ties. I was going to say, how many do you think had issues with their controls? Pretty much all 30. There was issues, gaps. They weren't embedded in their systems, or they were orphan statements. They had names of procedures. It was a bit of a cluster, to be fair. But now they're not, because they did the work. So we've already asked this question about the self-assessment rating. I think we agreed we're in the middle of the pack. And we know now that the impacts, if we don't get control statements right, if they're not specific, measurable, auditable, they're not defined correctly, they're not embedded in our management system, they're not going to be effective. They're not going to pass the test of time, and potentially our list of critical controls that are produced as a result of our bow tie are deficient, or potentially the wrong critical controls. Well, that's a copy over there. I'm not going to use that. So we round out some of the key ideas we've covered. The loss of control event needs to be the middle of the bow tie. We know that bow ties have a time and place, and they're for single hazard, single unwanted events. They're not for multiples or not for analyzing complex systems. And we need to ensure our controls are clearly defined inside our bow ties to ensure effectiveness. So we'll give you a minute now. Been through a fair bit of content. We'll go on pretty quickly. what's the aha moment, or what's your key learning or takeaway so far, just after everything that we've been through? Give you a minute just to throw in the chat. What is it? What are you seeing? What's something you've recognized? It's probably the first action point, key idea. Very interested in your sharing. Rob, where a bow tie fits in. Yeah, that's a good one, mate. Absolutely, David. Not to have multiple hazards within one bow tie, 100%. Awesome. Thanks, David. Who else? Some other ideas? Being able to clear these interesting consequences and the unwanted event. Yeah, 100%. Yes, we know the impacts. We don't get that right. Thanks, mate. Who else? Tom, Ryan, Alf. Anyone else? Matt G. Anyone else have an insight, a takeaway? Christian, differences between the physical control and the critical step, so to speak. Yeah, physical control. Yeah, I like that one. Probably unpack that as well. Or turn off my reminders. Okay, I'll keep moving forwards. Thank you, because I want to make sure we got time and space here. Craig, ensuring the knot is worded correctly, 100%. Could almost not even start the bow tie if that's the case. So, look, there's probably a few different reasons why people are rocked up. Clearly, there's some opportunities for improvement in bow tie. You're curious about what are some things that could be improved. We've covered off a lot of those key points there before. And then the obvious question is how do you go? How do you do it? How do you move forwards from here? And you can do I call it the trial and error way. You can do what I've been doing for the last 10 years, learn some stuff, try some stuff, fix some stuff, and then it evolves. That's one way. Or another way is you could take advantage of this program that we only just launched 2 weeks ago, actually. It's a critical control accelerator program. So I mentioned at the start, what you can do if you need more information or more help. And what we've done now is we've taken everything around critical controls, like our 5 years, 10 years worth of stuff, and we put it onto an online module. So I know this isn't so much about critical controls, but we know it's an output from them. And a few people talked about critical controls at the start. That in there is where we go, all of those, I think it's like the 6 different phases that we go through to get to a critical control to make sure that they are the true critical controls. So it's not for you if you nail critical controls, your business is all good, you're confident moving ahead. This would be for people who you think, oh, look, we could probably improve, we could apply these frameworks, or our organization is pretty ordinary, then certainly it's for you in there. I'll put the link there. And why am I talking about it? Because invariably I get asked the same thing each time about critical controls. And I'm all about, well, if there's a way that I can empower other people to do it to ultimately save lives at work, then everyone wins. So there's a fair bit in there. So I think a few of you might have heard this last week, including, because one of the things we get asked about all the time is, well, do you have a list of critical controls that I could, let's say, not copy, but reference against? And yes, we do. And that's what I've highlighted there. That's one of the things in there as well. So we share, one of our industry level critical controls, which a lot of our clients like as a stopgap measure while they're doing the bigger design works in the critical risk management space that takes time. So that's what's in there. Like fair bit of stuff on there. I've got the link in the chat. What I like about it, I wish it had been around when I was there, is it's 40 minutes of content, and all the templates are there, and you could save yourself years of heartache and pain. You don't have to pay expensive consultants, and that's pretty cheap there for 100 grand. Normally it's way more than that to do an end-to-end critical control review. You're paying $100, piggybacking off all of our experience, and then you can get the low-hanging fruit. So I've got the link to there, because as we mentioned, that then covers off this bit, going from what's a control on the bow tie through to the critical controls. But obviously that doesn't cover the full end-to-end critical risk management framework. So I think you guys might have seen this around. I know Matt G, we came close to running it for you guys. We also run a 2-day critical risk management course or masterclass, where we essentially, if I just go backwards, we run through this whole framework. So the ICMM framework, so the ICMM is good in terms of what to do, but it doesn't say how to do it. And that's where what we do in the 2-day course is we essentially go through each step. How do you do it? What's a template? Let's do a practical case study to go through everything. So at the end of it, you can walk away back into your organization with all of the templates, the knowledge, the practical case studies to be able to go end to end on critical risk management. So if this one's of interest to you, our last one is taking place in the first week, second week of December in Brisbane as a face-to-face. We do them virtually, but face-to-face is far more effective. So highly recommend, if you can make it, come and jump in on that. We've been running it for 3.5 years now, so it's really got some good traction. And special for people who are on the webinar, there's a little discount code set up as well, make it a little bit cheaper. So I'll put the link in there for that. Satisfaction guarantee, money back, all of that sort of stuff. I think you guys know we do a lot of work in lots of different spaces in health and safety. But that's enough from me in terms of talking. I'm interested in any questions that people have. So there's